Okay guys, in today's video, we're gonna go over how to BZO your rifle or AR pistol. If this is something that interests you, please keep watching. Okay, so like I said in the intro, we're gonna go over how to BZO your rifle or your AR pistol. So this topic came into play because my daughter went to a new optic. So her previous optic, let me grab it here. This here was her previous optic. It was a little optic, about 30 bucks off of Amazon, that I got for her, and I wasn't 100% sure that she was going to be into rifles, so I didn't want to buy her a full-fledged, expensive optic. So this was 30 bucks. She got a lot of uses out of it. She loved it. So once she moved up to something bigger, I put this optic on our training rifle here. So it did. So her old optic did get a new home. She ended up getting a SIG. I'm not sure the model, but she ended up getting a SIG. It's a little bit more. It's about 150, 155-ish. So she seems to like it. So we had to zero it. So I figured, hey, this would be a good time to explain how to zero your rifle. If you don't know what zeroing your rifle is, or BZO, is basically you get your sight set to a particular range that you determine so that you can consistently hit at that range, but then you also know windage adjustments. Windage and height adjustments, so that if you have to go out to different ranges, you can kind of do the math and say this range equals this at such and such distance, because a bullet travels like a football. So it goes out the barrel. All the images shows that it arches over. In theory, it actually falls, but the way you angle your barrel for the shot creates that arc of motion. So basically, let's say if you're zeroed at 10 yards and the arc is over here where those 2 points meet again on that same line, that'll be what your 10-yard zero equals. Let's say a generic number's 100. So let's say, I'm not sure what that 10 yards is, but let's say it's 10 yards here. So you take your target to 10 yards, and then this also equals 100 on the far end, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the purpose of having a zero on your rifle. Now, while we're doing that, there's a bunch of different zeros. Everybody has their favorite, and I would say it depends on what you want. So we're going to go over a couple of them. So you have the 25 to 300, I believe it is. So you zero your rifle at 25, and it's kind of equal to having your rifle zeroed at 300, if I'm not mistaken. And so this kind of gets you to just point of impact. Then you also have the 50 to 200 yards. And you also have, the Army does, I believe, 25 to 300 meters. So it's basically, because you don't have 300 meter, well, some ranges are 300 meters, but most of us don't have access to a 300 meter range that you can zero your rifle on. So they just did the math and said, okay, cool. 25 is the same as 300. The Marine Corps has a 36 to 300 yard zero. So you zero at 36 yards, and it's equivalent to about 300. And then you have just the old school 100 yard zero, and you just go from there. So with that said, which zero you choose is up to you. There's some charts. I'll try to add one here. There are some charts where you can just see on a silhouette target, you can see the different impacts, point of aim, point of impact, depending on your range and your zero. So those are pretty good to kind of go by. So in theory, you would want one where the most of your impacts, point of aim, point of impact, are on your target. Some might be high, some might be low, but you want majority of your rounds at each varying distance. I think they go up to maybe 400 yards or whatnot, but you want most of your rounds on that target. So that's kind of I would say one of the best things to do is to figure out which one works for you. And then you have to also think about your use case. So my daughter, she has a 25 to 300 yard zero. So is she ever going to shoot at 300 yards? Probably not. But she's comfortable at 25. You know, I might try to keep extending her zero as she gets more comfortable with her rifle. But right now she's comfortable at 25 yards, and she doesn't even care what it converts to. You know, so with her, we normally just shoot on the flat range. We're going to try to take some outdoor classes this year with her, but even those, the most she'll be at is 50, so she'll still be fine. Me personally, I have a 36 yard zero on this here. So this here is clear, nothing in there. There's no ammo in the room. So I have a 36 yard zero on this, just because it's smaller and my use for this is more close in. So I have a 36 yard zero, and I discussed it before. The reason I chose this optic is that it has a holdover, a height over bore holdover. So if you're close and if you're like 15 yards and in, it has an extra little triangle at the bottom to where you can hold over and still get your rounds on target. So that's why I like this. It gives me, for me, it gives me the best of both worlds. I can do a lot of close-up work with it, but I also can reach out and touch someone before I need to grab another rifle. So like I said, this one here is the 36 to 300 yard zero, which is also known as the Marine Corps zero. And I was a Marine, so I guess that's why I have it. All right. The next zero I have is on my longer gun is a 100 yard zero, which is this guy here. So, and this one also is clear as well. There's no round in here. There's no ammunition in the room. Actually, there's no ammunition in the building. So this one here is a 100 yard zero. And I don't know what it converts to, but the reason I have this is that it's a little bit easier for me to do the math when I'm doing my, when I'm going to my distances. Just because it's a whole number, I can, you know, I can make my adjustments a little bit quicker in my head, is, you know, or that's how I feel in my head, is that I can make the numbers a little bit quicker. So this one here is a 100 yard zero. So, you know, its purpose is to go out a little bit further. The most I've been with this so far, I want to say, is 600 yards, which is, yep, 600 yards, which is actually, that's my target here. I'll probably show you when I do a tour of the office, but that's my 600 yard target with this actual setup here. So these are my two zeros. I am probably going to, like I said, get another rifle to replace this one as my long range rifle, and this here just become my medium range rifle, let's call it. And I'll try to get something that goes out to 1,000. That'll be pretty fun. So I'm not sure what zero I would use. I'm not sure what zero I would use for that yet. So now that we kind of have the distances, the way I would say to zero your rifle, there's a bunch of different ways. First, it would be your position. If you should never zero your rifle standing up. Is your body just moves too much to get a consistent group. You know, you want your zero to be as perfect as possible, just so you can take out all those other variables. I also would prefer your zero to be indoors. That way you can eliminate wind out of the situation, because I just zeroed this and I'll show you some video of it. And I was off to the right and a little high, but the last time that I zeroed the rifle, I was outside and it was about 10 mile an hour wind, from left to right. So, you know, I'd rather have my zero in a vacuum. So when I do go out, I can say, okay, the wind is here. I can kind of adjust for it, if that makes sense. So if you are going to zero your rifle, I would say go seated. But most importantly, if you can go prone, I would suggest go prone. But seated is an option. So I'll show you images, and I think I have a video or two of my daughter zeroing her rifle at in the seated position, and I'll add that here. So when you're seated, you just kind of want to stay behind it. As you can see, I gave her, I believe, a front bag and a rear bag so that she can, you know, stay consistent and not have her body input too much into the rifle itself. And then once you do the seated, the best to me would be the prone. So we're going to add picture of me here in the prone, well, a video of me here in the prone, and you can't see my full body. You can just kind of see how I go from, you know, from here up. Okay, so next, let's talk about two ways you can go about your BZO. The way that I recommend students do it when they don't have a lot of experience behind the gun is I recommend that they get a larger target, a full-size target, and you place that onto your cardboard backer or whatever you're using to hold your target. You place that on first, then you place your BZO target on top of that. So you'll have a large blank target, and then you will have your smaller BZO target. Now, if you have a new cardboard backer or something to that nature, then you can just place a smaller target on there. But what this does is it allows you to, if you're, because most of the time the BZO targets are about the size of a, you know, like a full sheet of paper. You know, they're like, you know, this size, like a sheet of paper, maybe a little bit bigger. But because that's so small, you might be off of that sheet of paper. You'll have this blank space that's clean. So now when you place your rounds on target, because you're BZOing, you're not going to be on the piece of paper. You might be off over here. So now you have this clean section to move those rounds, you know, to do hard adjustment to get those rounds back onto the BZO paper. All right. And while you're doing that, I only recommend shooting about 3 rounds each. So, well, 2 to 3 rounds. You know, it makes no sense to waste ammo shooting a bunch of rounds, and you can see that they're impacting over here. Don't waste that. Don't waste that ammunition. Shoot 1 or 2 rounds, maybe 3 max, to see, okay, I'm over here. Then you do a hard adjustment, shoot 2 to 3 more rounds. Once you kind of get on paper, dial it in a little bit more. Once you get close to whatever the center of your BZO target is, then I would swap out the BZO target for a clean one, and then I would start doing 5 rounds, because that way you get more data points versus you had 3 rounds. You had 1 round here, 1 round there, 1 round there. You're taking the center and moving that center over to your zero, to the center of the target, and then starting over. But if you had 5 rounds, you got more data points, because 2 of those rounds might have just been flyers. So, you know, you might have 1 here, 1 there, and then 3 right here. So now because you did 3 rounds or 5 shots, you can take this as your true center and move this over versus these 2 rounds that are just flyers, if that makes sense. So that's, like I said, that's how I want new shooters to do it, just because you get more time behind the gun. Now, if you're an experienced shooter and you've BZO'd a couple of times, what I would do is, and also it helps save time, is I would use a laser bore sight. Put a laser bore sight in your firearm, and then, get it, whatever the distance, most distance are 25 yards. So I would basically, turn on the laser, get on your optic, and basically what you do is your laser's pointing here in your bore, then you'll bring your optic down over until they kind of line up and meet. Once that happens, you can pull it out, you can pull the laser out, then shoot your 5 rounds, because you should be on paper. You should be pretty close, depending on, unless you're some crazy distance out, you should be pretty close. Then I would tighten up that 0 from there. So if you do those 2 things, you'll have a pretty good tight 0. And then also what I like to do is, once I get close, so like you'll see me close, I'll try to put a picture up, but you'll see me close and I'll say, okay, cool. I've probably shot 20-30 rounds at that point. I'm like, okay, let's take a break. I'll come back tomorrow, or I'll come back next week, or whenever, and then I'll do it again, because you kind of get fatigued. I know it doesn't seem like you're doing a lot, but it's a lot of concentration going on, and a lot of mental gymnastics, like, I need to calm down, what's the, so many MOA, so many clicks per whatever. So just take a break, come back later, and start back where you left off. You might be on target, you might be a little bit off, you might be whatnot, and then just fine tune it a little bit more. And sometimes I just do BZO drills where I just keep fine tuning my 0, because I get more comfortable behind the firearm, and it's just more, I just get more comfortable, and I'm like, okay, cool. I know, hey, if I pull my thumb over here, if I pull the trigger this way, it's just, you're just learning a little bit more. So that's how I recommend that you BZO. There's a bazillion ways out of there. This is one of them. Add this tool to your toolbox. So if you have any questions, or you have any other tips or suggestions, please put them in the comments below. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. And we have a 2A newsletter that goes out bi-weekly. That'll be the first link in the description. Please subscribe. We don't spam you. It's not a bunch of advertisements from me. It's just basically 2A articles that I've came across and I think are interesting, and I just share them with you. So thank you. Have a good day, and see you soon.